In both my pink and red fabrics, I cut out various strips that were the width of my ruler, which was 3 inches long. Then I laid those strips down horizontally, used my ruler as a guide, and cut out a whole bunch of 3-inch squares. Once I'd cut out a sizable amount of red and pink squares, I laid them out just to kind of get an idea of what direction I wanted to take it. Looking at this, there are 12 rows of these sewn together, and that length hits me about mid-calf if I also do like a 2-inch waistband at the top. So this is the length of the skirt that I want. So now the next step is to continue to make more of these little rows and sew them together to make the next panel. I'm not sure how many more. I need to do a little bit more math to figure out, because this is not originally how I had planned to do it. I had a different way I had planned, but I like focusing on 4 rows at a time instead. So I am gonna have to figure out a little bit more math, but it's gonna be great. I'm really excited. I think the hardest part for me was knowing I was gonna have to stitch so many squares together. I'm not usually a quilter, but this was just kind of a project I could put on a show in the background and just stitch to my heart's content. I had a lot of fun with it, even though it did get kind of tedious and monotonous. But that's what you get when you decide you're going to make a quilted piece of clothing. And 384 squares total, that's a lot of squares. But I think it's worth it in the end. Something that was actually really stressful about this project is that it started out a scrap fabric buster. And then I realized I needed more of the red fabric, and I ordered it, and when I ordered it, it was not the right color. And I think I talk about it a little bit later in the video, but it really stressed me out, especially because when I tried to reorder it, it was the last 4 yards available anywhere. And so I was terrified that by the time I ordered the right fabric and it got to my house, that somebody was going to purchase it before me. I was pretty stressed. I think it's safe to say. But it came, and funnily enough, I only ended up using like an 8-inch piece out of the whole 4 yards. So now I have extra fabric to make something with. So I'm calling it a win still. Don't forget to press those seams, because that makes the biggest difference when you're doing any type of quilted project, obviously, or any sewing project. But I felt like if I was going to do this and I was going to spend all this time, I wanted my lines to look crisp. So this was a crucial step in the process. Once all those strips were pressed nice and flat, I decided to lay everything out to make sure I had enough pink squares lining up with red squares and vice versa. And then we went to the next tedious part, which was trying to line up all of those corners. I did the best I could. Some of them did, slip through the cracks a little bit. They didn't line up completely, but I wasn't super nitpicky about it. I made it work. Ugh, this part. I feel like it was kind of stressful. Like I said, I'm kind of new to quilting. It's not something I do very often, and the last big quilt project I made was in high school over a decade ago. So I don't know if I just need to practice it more, or there's some tips and tricks that I just don't know. But this was tedious for me, just to try to get all those bulky corner seams lined up and opened up and pressed flat, and it was a lot. But I think in the end, it turned out okay. Updates on the checkered skirt. I ordered some more of this red fabric because I was using what I had found in a scrap project. And I didn't have enough, but when I ordered it, I could have sworn that this was the color that I ordered because this was the color of the listing. It was not. It was a maroon color. Obviously, that's not what this is. This is like fire engine red, like candy apple red, okay? It was not the same color. So I did have to go in and reorder it, and that came today, and it is the right color. So that has been washed and dried. It just needs to be ironed. Then I can cut it into more squares. I think after that, I'm just gonna continue sewing these rows together and then combine them. I have 12 of these long rows to complete before I can sew them together to turn it into a panel, and I am 3.5 rows in. I have finished the first panel already. It's 192 squares. That is a lot of squares, but I'm excited about it. I have plans for adding pockets and how I want to do the waistband and all of the other little details. We're gonna see if that's how it goes. I can't decide. I guess the big thing to do now is just to get in there and sew more squares together. It's been a few days since I last checked in. I finally finished both panels, and I have the lining piece attached with some safety pins. I just need to stitch them together. And I have been making the second panel pretty much all day. I am very tired. The sun has gone down, but I'm slowly getting there. But I'm ready for bed, so I think I will work on it a little bit more tomorrow. I didn't have a rhyme or reason when I started quilting the two pieces together on how I was gonna do it. I did end up going every other like pink square and following that down the whole way, and I did start in the middle and work my way out. On the first panel I started outward and worked in, and I felt like everything shifted a little bit, so that's why I changed it up. But I'm really happy with my stitch lines. Like, they look good, they blend in. Then I finished all the raw edges of the pockets and began the process of constructing the skirt, which was the most fun because it went by super quick. I lined the top of my pocket up with that bottom corner square, and I did that for both panels, one on each side, so 4 total, and then stitched them on. After the pocket pieces were sewn on, I went in with my serger to kind of clean up the raw edges and just to make sure that there was not going to be any fraying before I sewed everything together. Then, with right sides together, I put my 2 panels and pocket pieces facing each other and started pinning everything together. Pinned around the pocket and down the length of the skirt on both sides, and then stitched everything together. And we're so close to being done. When stitching, I would get to the point where the pocket met the skirt. I would put my needle down into my fabric, lift my presser foot, pivot, put my presser foot back down, and continue my stitching all the way around. Once everything had been sewn together, I pressed the seams open and flat, made sure everything was nice and crisp, and then I added 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top of the skirt. I forgot to film that, but that's the next couple of steps. And then to add the waistband, I cut out a red strip of fabric that was 4 inches wide that I could fold in half to get a 2-inch waistband by the circumference of my waist plus about 3 inches for just a little bit of comfort and ease. And then I pinned everything together and very slowly stitched, leaving a 2-inch opening at the side that I could slip the elastic through. And once the elastic was fed through, I stitched the elastic together, made sure everything was even in the waistband, stitched her all up, finished the raw edges, and then I did go ahead and add some rows of stitching into the elastic itself just to make sure that the elastic didn't roll with wear. I finally decided on a hem, which was surprisingly the hardest part. I didn't want to take away any details. I just wanted something that made it one cohesive piece, and I think adding the red 2-inch strip at the bottom was the right call. So I did that by stitching this down with a straight stitch, and then on the raw edge I folded it under about 1/4 of an inch and then flipped it over and pinned everything in place. And then I actually decided to hand stitch the hem to the inside lining of the skirt. Let's see it finished.